Hello there. Why don't we start the webinar? So my name is Bruce Suttmeyer, and I'm the Dean of the College here at Lewis and Clark. As Dean, I am Chief Academic Officer of the college, which basically means that I oversee all academic concerns, faculty, curriculum, instruction, and instructional support services. And that includes everything from advising to overseas to the library. I've been at Lewis and Clark for about 20 years. I was Associate Dean for Faculty Development for 2 years and have been in my current role for 3 years. I am also a faculty member. I teach Japanese language and literature in the World Languages Department, and this past spring I taught a senior seminar on contemporary life through Japanese literature, and I plan to teach this coming spring as well. With me today are 4 colleagues. We have 4 panelists in addition to myself, and so let me have them introduce themselves before we get fully underway. So why don't we start with Professor Rob Kugler. Rob?
Hi, my name is Rob Kugler. I'm the Paulus Wright Professor of Christian Studies. I teach in religious studies and classics, and I'll be teaching a couple of courses I'll talk to you about this fall shortly.
Great, thank you, Rob. Next, we have Ann Bentley. Ann?
Thanks, Bruce. Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Bentley. I teach in the chemistry department. I've been at Lewis and Clark about 13 years. And I typically, in a given year, will teach introductory chemistry courses and also advanced courses in inorganic chemistry and nanomaterials chemistry, which are my specialties. And as a side note, I am one of 2 faculty athletics reps at Lewis and Clark, which means I work with student athletes to help them balance academics and their work in athletics.
Thank you. Next is Kaylee McCauley. Kaylee, I don't know if you are muted. Are you here?
I think I just unmuted myself.
There you go.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kaylee McCauley. Students often call me Dr. K, so if you hear them refer to me as that, that's who they're talking about. I serve as the Associate Dean of Students at Lewis and Clark College and the Director of Student Support Services, which I will be talking with you more about today.
Thank you. And last is Katie McFadden. Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie McFadden, Assistant Dean and Managing Director of the College Advising Center. I was told I should also share that this picture is from Lewis and Clark last spring walking around on campus, so that's my Zoom background.
Thank you. That is much nicer than my Zoom background, which is my office. Thank you for everybody who's joining us today, and thank you for the panelists for making time to help me talk a little bit about academic planning for the fall. So our goal today with this webinar really is to give you an overview and an update of our planning. Everything from the semester-long calendar, schedule updates, to a discussion of classes and changes in the classroom. And what we've been hearing from you is that you've read the website, you've gotten the emails from President Vivell and from Vice President Robin Holmes Sullivan and from myself, and that what you want is more detailed, more specific information about what classes are going to look like and what instruction will be like in this unusual semester coming up. So this desire for more specific information is one of the reasons that I wanted and why I invited Professors Kugler and Bentley to be with us today, so they can talk about their specific classes and their specific plans for working with their students, your students, in the coming semester. They are, of course, they are 2 of over 200 faculty that will be teaching in the fall. But my hope is that they can give you a sense of some of the specifics, some of the approaches that we're taking to make sure that your students get the kind of education that we pride ourselves on here at Lewis and Clark. So let me start with a bit of an overview, and then I'll hand over to my colleagues to each speak for several minutes about their own areas of expertise. And then we'll move on to your questions. So first, we know that there are many families of returning students who might be tuning in today. But please recognize we're focusing most of the information for new students, for first-time students, as we present. And thank you all for those who submitted questions in advance. We'll be taking your questions throughout this webinar as we speak. So in addition to those previous questions, you'll see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A function, and that is where you can submit your questions, and we'll get to those in the second half of our webinar today. So let me start and giving you an overview and introduction to academics. Let me first, kind of amid all of the changes, amid all of the things that we'll go over today, let me stress some of the commonalities that, that will be in place that mark students' transitions to Lewis and Clark every year, and I think will be in play this year as well. Everything that we talk about today is in the context of the vast jump and huge differences between high school academics and the education that your students will get at Lewis and Clark. And in this transition, it will be no different than in a more ordinary year, some of these challenges that your students will face. They will be taking more responsibility for their day-to-day and week-to-week management of their learning. There's a lot of support, but there is less hand-holding, and students really must learn as part of the education process and as part of the maturation process to advocate for themselves and to advocate for their education. The expectations and responsibilities of being part of an educational community like at Lewis and Clark will, of course, be heightened this year because there are additional responsibilities of health and safety that we're asking of all students, both for the students themselves, of course, and for the health and safety of the entire community. The mandatory masking, the small cohorting that we're asking of students, social distancing, this will be in addition to, but not fundamentally different from, the kind of academic responsibilities that we ask students to take every year. So with that as my kind of introduction, let me break down my remarks into two broad categories. And the first is nuts and bolts, just some basics. And then the second is classroom instruction and the kinds and types of classes that will mark the fall semester at LC. So first, some of the nuts and bolts, the semester calendar. Some of this information you will have gotten via email. Most of it is on the website, but I reiterate it today because it is so important. The calendar has been changed. Classes will start on August 31st, a Monday, and the last day of on-campus instruction will be Friday, November 20th. That is the Friday before Thanksgiving. Students will then resume classes after Thanksgiving, many students will go home during that week-long break. On Monday, November 30th, online instruction will begin for all classes, and those last 10 days of instructional days of the semester will be completely online. And students will also take finals remotely as well. We've done this, and many schools have done this for health reasons, because we don't want students traveling long distances during the semester. All of that information is on the Fall 20 reopening page off of the main website, as well as on the College Registrar webpage as well. Second is the daily schedule of classes. We've made some changes there as well. All of those changes to times for student classes have already been updated in WebAdvisor, which is the platform that your students have been using to register for classes and to keep track of many of the academic components of getting ready at Lewis and Clark. They will have noticed that we have put in some extra time between classes. We have staggered some of those start and end times. And these changes, in addition to changes we've made in signage, in markings, in buildings, designating the flow within those buildings. This is really to allow for safer entrance and exits and safer movement in the classes. It also will allow for cleaning throughout the day of classrooms. The classrooms themselves have been upgraded with new technology, better microphones, better cameras, and all summer faculty have been doing dozens of workshops to get ready for using that technology. Also, the layouts of the classrooms have been altered. I'm sure this isn't surprising. We are reducing the density of classrooms. We are spacing seats, all seats at least 6 feet distance. We are following the Higher Ed Coordinating Commission of Oregon and the Oregon Health Authority in following their guidelines for safe instruction for the fall. And lastly, in the nuts and bolts section, we also have a number of outdoor classroom spaces. We have tents, which I'm happy to say arrived yesterday on campus and have already been put up. I've been sending pictures around to various faculty of the tents. We are also utilizing some covered areas around campus, large conference spaces, even the stadium, which has a very large overhang, will be used as well. And really, in other words, we're making use of a lot more spaces around campus for academic use. So in terms of my nuts and bolts, let me stop there and turn to the second piece of my opening remarks, which are around classes themselves. And I'll be a little broader, a little more sweeping in my discussion, and I'll let my colleagues put in the details. We have over 667 to be exact, classes in the fall. So trying to really create concepts and explain everything from ballet to biology is no easy task. We have divided the classes for the fall into 3 categories around the modality of classroom instruction. And these categories will be marked for each class in WebAdvisor, that platform your students use for registering for classes, by this weekend. So by this weekend, classes will be marked in the 3 categories, which are in-person required, online, and hybrid. And let me take each one of those one by one and explain a little in a little more detail. But I also want you and your students to recognize, as I kind of describe them and as my colleagues describe them, that how we're structuring all of our classes, all of these classes are built on the kind of close, personalized teaching that we're rightfully known for, that we take a lot of pride in here at Lewis and Clark. And really the modality in some ways is secondary to the instructional time that the faculty member and your students will have. The first category, in-person required, those are classes where, due to the unique material of the class, the kind of class that it is not possible to complete those classes remotely. There are 15 of those classes. They are already marked on WebAdvisor. Students can find a list off of the college advising website. They include things like Introduction to Ceramics and Tennis. And I don't think there will be many surprises in terms of the classes that are in that list. The next category is online or remote classes. They're designated as online on WebAdvisor. These classes will be primarily or exclusively taught through remote instruction. So most music lessons, for example, we've determined will be remote, since both for safety reasons, for pedagogical reasons, everything from flute lessons to voice lessons to chorus, we've determined that they are done more effectively, they're done more safely via remote instruction. We are making it so students will have practice rooms and will have spaces to do those on campus, but they will be done remotely. And those will be marked as well on WebAdvisor. The last category, hybrid, constitute the vast majority of classes that we will have in the fall. These classes will meet regularly in person, but all of them will have remote components to allow students to access these courses. Students who are not present in the classroom to have access to all of these great classes. So I know some students have taken advantage of the fully remote option that we have for the fall, and those students can sign up for either hybrid classes or fully remote classes. And the hybrid classes, of course, will be marked in WebAdvisor as hybrid. Any categorization like this collapses all kinds of details and differences among classes. So let me end my discussion of classrooms there. Certainly, I'm sure we'll get into some more of that discussion in the question and answer section. But now let me have my colleagues put a little more details and specifics behind my broad brushstrokes. And with that, let me turn and ask Rob Kugler if he could speak for a while. Thank you.
Happy to do so. So glad to be here, and thanks to all of you parents who are with us today as well. So I'm one of those folks who's going to teach my two courses almost 100% online. I'll come to the in-person component in a few moments. The reason for that is actually twofold. On the one hand, I've got somebody in my household who's at really serious risk of serious illness if I were to bring coronavirus home. So I need to teach in such a way as to reduce my exposure to the possibility. I also realized as we prepared for the fall that there's all of us who are teaching, both Lewis and Clark or any other school, we have to be prepared to go 100% online if circumstances require that. I came to Lewis and Clark, let's see, 18 years ago. I'm beginning my 19th year. And I came from a place, a big university that had a vague sense of the liberal arts. I have become such a committed faculty member when it comes to a great liberal arts education. As I face this task of delivering courses to your students, I decided I needed to come up with a model and approach that was going to sort of maintain the integrity of that for them and for me. I was not interested in teaching this fall if I couldn't ensure that I could do the same job I do when we're in person. So I set out to look for that, and one of the other reasons I think is it's important to remember that we're at a sort of a moment in history when liberally educated people are absolutely essential to our future. So I do want to commend you for sending your kids to this school because we're doing what they're doing what we need for the future. So I want to tell you what I came up with. And I want to start by saying it's not unique. It was, for me, seconded and confirmed by a New York Times column from Lisa Feldman Barrett. Some of you may have read it. She's at Northeastern University. I know a number of colleagues, a number of us are in conversation about how we're going to do this at Lewis and Clark. So this will be repeated across the curriculum in a number of places. And again, to give you some context, I'm teaching 2 100-level courses, that is introductory courses this fall. One, Religious Studies 105, Apocalyptic Imagination. It's a course that is typically pretty popular. We use our 100-level courses in religious studies to introduce students to the discipline of religious studies through a topic, and in this case, apocalyptic, from antiquity to the present. And as you can imagine, it's a popular topic right now. So I've got 40 students with 16 on the wait list, and we'll see how that goes. I'm also teaching a section of our new core course, Core 120. The title of my section is Preparing for a Post-COVID-19 World, Lessons from Antiquity. And it's full at 19. So I'm going to be busy. These are both normally writing intensive courses. The core course, the first year course more so. I'm going to sort of apply that principle to both of them this semester because I can do that given the way I've chosen to do this. Usually when I'm in person, they are sort of this lecture dialogue format with some whole class and small group discussion. So in brief, what I've decided to do in lieu of being in the classroom with these students is sort of a good old-fashioned British style, Cambridge, Oxford lecture tutorial model. So what that means in this context will be, ordinarily I'd spend 3 60-minute sessions with these students a week. What I'll do in lieu of that now is 35 to 40-minute pre-recorded lectures that students then will be responsible to have viewed. Those lectures will be tuned to the reading that they will have done in preparation for those class sessions. I'm going to use Panopto, which I'm getting acquainted with these days to record the lectures. I'm going to use other sort of multimedia tools to ensure that those videos are the kind of energetic, fast-paced, information-packed sort of stuff that your students are used to. The truth is, they're used to absorbing entertainment via online delivery. I'm going to take advantage of that as often as I can in making sure that they're excited to watch those videos. The real meat of the course, though, are going to be these weekly tutorials of 60 minutes each with 5 students in each tutorial group. Tutorial sessions will be prompt-driven discussions of the reading material and the videos that they will have viewed before they come to their tutorial session with me. Because they're small groups, I'm very confident that some, maybe all students, particularly in the Religious Studies 105 course, it's normally a big sort of lecture discussion. I'm pretty confident these students are going to come out of the semester with considerably more learning than in fact might have been otherwise the case. Nobody can hide out in a tutorial. Everyone has to prepare. They have to be ready to engage in dialogue with me and their peers. So as a consequence, these are going to be, in some cases, more intense experiences for students than they might otherwise be. I have some experience with this. In the spring semester, I was teaching an extra course, our Greek 202, our 4th semester Greek course, which is always a small group. I had 5. When we were doing that last week together before we went fully online, we were trying to do that socially distant. Nobody was using masks yet, but it was a bit of an awkward experience. When we went to Zoom, it worked. What was fascinating about it for me was the fact that I really was able to work with each of them over a 60-minute period and ensure that everybody contributed and everybody left that experience having really advanced their learning, their knowledge. I was very, very excited by the experience, and it really sort of inspired me to choose this model for the fall. I will also hold one-on-one writing conferences with students as they progress through their multi-stage writing project over the course of the semester. Because those are one-on-one meetings, some of them will take place in my office. I'm comfortable enough where I've sort of got control of that setting. I suspect, I really hope I get to meet all of these students in person in my office for those kinds of meetings. Some of them I suspect will choose to do them on Zoom as well, but those writing conferences will vary. All of them will have to meet with me twice. Some oftentimes will meet with me 3-4 times or more, depending on their writing progress. I can come back during question and answer and talk to you about the requirements and how we administer exams under these conditions. But that gives you an idea of what it is I plan on doing with students this fall. I want to acknowledge, and this isn't to pat myself on the back, but I think it is to tell you what's the case for all of us, not just me, but for all of the faculty who are making these kinds of changes in order to ensure that we do what we do at Lewis and Clark and continue to do it well. This is really going to increase my instructional time. For the religious studies course, it'll probably increase my instructional time 4 times. But that's a burden I'm really willing to accept to continue to do this job with the kind of integrity that I think is important, both for me and for your students. So I look forward to your questions. Back to you, Bruce.
Thank you. Rob is not kidding when he said it is increasing his instructional time quite a bit. And I know my own household, when I told them I am planning to teach in the spring as well, tried to dissuade me of that, but I'm not dissuaded. Let's move to Ann Bentley. Ann, could you speak a little bit about your teaching coming up in the fall?
Yes, thanks, Bruce. I think we're all looking forward to seeing our students again this fall. We've really missed them over the summer. So as I mentioned earlier, I teach in the chemistry department. And our goals as a faculty are to really focus on enabling the students to make progress to their degree as one common goal. So I think, online learning is daunting to a chemist because they're very hands-on in the lab portion of courses. And we were tempted to, throw up the hands and just say it's impossible and forget it. And until we realized that, this pandemic is not going away. So we're going to have to learn how to live through it and with it. And in terms of helping the students make sure that they're still making progress towards their degree. And I've been inspired especially by the class of 2020 in the chemistry department, who in the last couple of weeks have been moving themselves to Austin, Texas, and South Bend, Indiana, and Salt Lake City, and they are taking steps. They're moving forward with their post-graduation plans, and we're really excited. So transitionally, we're also excited about the new students coming to Lewis and Clark. And so let me focus a bit on one of the classes I'm teaching this fall. So typically I'll teach an intro class and also an advanced class. And this fall, my intro is our standard general chemistry course that's called Chem 110. And I have a lot of experience with this class. In fact, we just moved me into this class a few weeks ago because I've taught it so frequently that we want people in our department to be teaching classes that they have a lot, of experience with. I should also put in a plug if you're a student who's interested in majoring in a science at Lewis and Clark, you should think about coming to our Friday, August 14th at 4 o'clock Pacific time advising session where we'll check over your schedules and give you advice and make sure everything's all set. So, okay, so typically in 110, I'm going to briefly talk about what this course looks like in a typical year, and I will try really hard not to dwell too much on it because this is not a typical year, but I think it's good to hear the baseline or the background. So in a standard year, we have between 100 and 150 total students enrolled in a number of different sections of the course, but most of those are about 60 or above per section. So they're fairly large for Lewis and Clark. That is kind of on the large side. A student would come 3 times a week to a 1-hour lecture, which is a little bit more the style that's called Sage on the Stage. And that means that I entertain the class at the front and pontificate about chemistry and mix in a lot of active learning, little clicker questions and things, but it's very focused on the instructor. And the student in that 1 hour is taking notes, answering questions, working with a partner next to them. But that's like the content delivery is those 3 lectures. Then they have one 1-hour workshop in a typical time where there's 30 people in the room working in groups of 3, and we have an undergraduate peer leader helping and the instructor circulating. Oh, and I brought my visual aid. We use these excellent whiteboards. We bought like 10 or 15 of those a number of years ago. They're very good for group work. And they're actually key, we're going to use them in the online setting too. So that's really your chance to interact with your instructor. You have a lab as a student in the typical 3-hour lab once a week, but the instructor for the lab is rarely the same person as your lecture instructor. Okay, so what's happening in this fall to look different? We currently have a typical number of students enrolled. We have 2 primary sections of this course, one at 10:30, 5 days a week, and the other at 1 o'clock, 5 days a week. And there's 2 of us, myself and Professor Lewis Kuo is the other professor. But he and I are kind of going to be running the same course together. So these courses are always very highly linked, and they'll continue to be. So a typical week as we are currently planning it, and I'm going to describe it, and basically we have formatted this plan with online learning at the center, and in-person aspects for people on campus will also be, a key. Very much similar to what Rob was describing, in that we want our time with the students to focus on helping the students learn how to do the chemistry themselves. And this is more a guide on the side, is the other phrase I've heard in education, way to approach it. Or I think of myself as the student's coach in their work. So if we have time in person with students, we do not want to use that time to be droning along in any lectures. Not that we drone in the normal times, but okay. So a Monday, this is the draft plan. Monday would be everybody together in one big Zoom lecture for that one day, where we look over the week. The week will have the same pattern every week. We may answer some muddiest point questions that students have brought up, what's concerning them, give an overview, do some activities in groups in those sessions, maybe a little content delivery. And then a given student will come, so let's say you're an on-campus student, you would come to a workshop on Tuesday or Wednesday, one of those days, and then you would come on Thursday or Friday. And one of those, this is complicated. It's been fun to design it. The creative challenge is actually really fun. So your Tuesday, Wednesday day might be an online day in a Zoom breakout room with 12 students. But if that's the case, then your Thursday or Friday day will be in person with 12 students. So you'll be working in a small, tiny group of 12. And your little group either comes to workshop in person one day a week and Zooms the other day a week, or if you're a fully online student, then both of those 12-person workshops are Zoom. And that allows us, we're actually not trying to link our in-person students with our Zoom students at the same time. That got to look kind of complicated. So we're designing it to keep them a little separate, though everybody's together on Monday, which will be good for community building. Okay, one thing that will remain a total constant is the homework in Chem 110. It's been an online system for 5 years now. We love our online system. It gives students, if they miss a problem, they immediately are given a hint and asked to redo it. So they're not waiting 5 days for us to grade it on paper, but they're getting immediate feedback. So we've loved that system. We're keeping that exactly the same. Lab for the fall. Folks who are on campus are coming to lab in smaller groups of 12 again instead of 24 every other week. We have an excellent PPE plan that involves masks that do not fog up whatever you're wearing on your eyes, safety glasses or safety goggles, depending on the lab, and face shields. We're doing this same in-lab experiments, and when you're not coming to lab, you're working on a computational system, which we've already used before. Students who are online may be partnered with in-class students as their support. I could see assigning the online student all the pre-lab calculations and asking them for help either during lab or working through video content. data analysis is the same for all students, no matter where they are. So, all of our thinking, again, we're keeping central our goals, which is to help the students make progress to their degree. We did not want anyone to just say, oh, there's no chemistry this year. Like that's just not an option. And we're also keeping all of our original learning goals as the center of our planning. So that's a synopsis. I hope it wasn't too long. Happy to take questions later. Back to you, Bruce.
Great, thank you, Anne. So let's turn to Kaylee first. Kaylee and Katie, who can talk a little bit more about some of the support systems, some of the kind of navigating academics that they kind of help lead here at Lewis and Clark. So let me turn it over to Kaylee McCauley.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Okay, so again, Kaylee McCauley. I serve as the Director of Student Support Services, and it's actually the Department of Student Support Services, which is made up of the Office of Student Support Services and the Office of Case Management. The Office of Student Support Services serves all students at the college, so undergraduate students, law students, and graduate students. And our primary role is to support students with disabilities. We determine and facilitate academic accommodations and also living accommodations as well. We work with all students, even students who don't have accommodations at the college, to help them develop their distinct ways of learning. If they would like to develop study skills, learning strategies, keys for academic success and self-advocacy that Bruce talked about at the beginning of our session today. The Office of Case Management, on the other hand, specializes in helping students make connections to off-campus and on-campus healthcare providers, as well as other on-campus resources. So for example, maybe the Office of Inclusion and Multicultural Engagement or the Office of Spiritual Life. These two offices work collaboratively and support students as they navigate their academic and social experiences at the college. So I just wanted to make sure we talked about the distinction between the two offices there, Student Support Services and Case Management. But today I'm going to talk to you primarily about the Office of Student Support Services. So if you're a student, or if you are a student on the call, if you had an IEP or a 504 in high school and had academic accommodations in high school or at a previous institution, if you're a transfer perhaps, our office would be a great resource for you. If you worked with an academic coach, writing coach, anyone that helped you with additional academic support, our office is also a good stop for you. If you're currently managing mental health or physical health concerns, had an injury or illness while you're at Lewis and Clark, or just want to improve those study skills and learning strategies, we'd love to work with you. In terms of plans for this fall, our office is going to be open. Our testing center is going to be open. We have a testing center for students who have exam accommodations. So our physical office will be open, but all of our appointments with students will be held by phone or Zoom. The format of appointments via phone or Zoom works really well for us. All of our documentation, all of our student records, forms, etc., are all managed electronically. And remote meetings and electronic records, these things are all part of our daily operations even before COVID. So it works really well for us, and we're going to continue that method moving forward. Really the only in-person services that we'll have where students actually come to the office are for emergencies, or if students are taking exams here on campus to receive their exam accommodations. Otherwise, all of our services will work as is, just in that remote delivery by phone or by Zoom. So all that being said, we're working really closely with students and families over the summer. I've had countless Zoom and phone calls with students and families as they're preparing to come to campus. I actually brought 2 of my staff members back early from their summer vacation to help support students and make sure that y'all were able to get appointments with us because our calendars were filling up quite quickly. So now we have plenty of availability for y'all to make appointments with us to talk through any questions or concerns you might have around academic support. We're also working really closely with faculty members, especially for students who are choosing to study remotely, to ensure that those students who have accommodations have full accessibility in that remote learning environment. So we're actively reaching out to faculty to make sure, you know, we're supporting students in that way. Otherwise, if you're a student listening in or you're a parent and you have a student who is considered in a high risk category per the CDC, and you have concerns about on-campus engagement, concerns about living in the residence halls, concerns about engaging academically, please reach out to us. Your students are able to schedule appointments with us online. We'd be happy to meet with you and talk about any concerns that you might have. Yeah, I think that's all for me, and I'll pass it over to Bruce. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kaylee. And let's move to Katie McFadden with that beautiful background. Katie.
Sure. So hi again, this is Katie McFadden in the College Advising Center, sometimes called the CAC. And undergraduate students at Lewis and Clark from the summer prior to matriculating all the way through till graduation are paired with 2 advisors, which I really like. We pair them with a faculty advisor as well as someone from the CAC. And the CAC advisors, myself and my staff, we just work to support the work of faculty and work in collaboration with faculty advisors and help students, especially with long-term planning and long-term goal setting and putting together a course of study that can fulfill their goals and interests. So what that looks like in a typical summer is a lot of phone calls and video chats with students, incoming first years, transfers, and returners about registration for fall and looking at some academic planning. And then of course this summer, that's meant all of that with just the additional layer of questions and conversations about how to manage these choices with COVID going on. So we know that some instructors have reached out to their classes recently, maybe in the last week, to describe what things will look like in the fall, and that students and families are eager for more information about classes. So as Bruce mentioned, that information about course type is being added to WebAdvisor right now, and then by the weekend we expect it all to be there. If a student wants to be off campus and fully remote and is choosing that option, they can be enrolled in the hybrid classes or the online classes. And then if a student is planning on being in Portland and coming on campus, they could be enrolled for any of the 3 types, the ones that require in-person and the online, and then of course the hybrid. They should expect to participate in those classes for students who are coming on campus. They should expect to participate, you know, in the classes as designed by the instructors, meaning that courses with in-person elements will require their attendance or participation in person. And I just wanted to add, you know, this is something I tell students a lot in advising during non-COVID times, but I think it's all the more important right now. And that's that Lewis and Clark, we build a lot of room for exploration into the degree, and it's there by design. And so there are likely multiple ways to put together your fall schedule and still accomplish your long-term goals. So if you're feeling confused or stuck about how to proceed this fall, please feel free to reach out to our office. If you look up College Advising Center on the main L. Clark page, the first thing will be our site. And then right there on the homepage, we have a Book Now button, which is an online appointment system. It's the same that Kaylee's office uses, and it makes it really easy to book an appointment with us and talk. So we're available if you'd like to do that. Okay, I think I'll pass things back to you, Bruce, and maybe we can work on some of the questions.
Sure, great. Thank you very much. So why don't we turn to some of the questions that people have submitted, and I'll ask my fellow panelists to help me answer some of them. The first one I can partially answer, so I'll be reaching out to some of you. The person writes, will on-campus services, for example, study abroad office, career center, professor's office hours, be available to students either in person or online? So the library, let me talk about the library, one of the biggest kind of services on campus. We did a lot of work in the spring and continued all summer to digitize a lot of material for classes, for students doing research, some of the methodology classes. The library, we plan to have the library open for its regular hours, which is 24 hours during the week, Monday through Friday, and more reduced, they've got to go home sometime, more reduced hours during the weekend. But we have done a lot of work in the library to de-densify that space a bit, to make it safer, to put the seating, plexiglass, but the library is one of the hearts of the campus, and it's important and is an incredible resource for our students who are on campus, who use it for educational purposes and for social purposes. And that's important in non-COVID years and COVID years. So the library will be available, obviously for on-campus folks, but the digital collections that the library has will also be available to those who are remote. I'll talk about just the study abroad office, and then maybe I'll ask Katie and Kaylee answered it a bit, but I'll just ask them to talk about their offices, and then I think I'll ask Anne to talk about her office hours. So the study abroad office will be open, as will other offices on campus. We will be doing more online appointments, just because we think that that's what students will want and need. But we will have those offices open in person if they need to drop off things, if they need to talk to somebody. So Katie, could you talk about your office in terms of its availability for folks both in person and online?
Yeah, we're doing something similar to what Kaylee described for student support services, which is that the office will be open, but we are going to keep appointments by video and phone, just because 6 feet apart and masked is a little bit harder to communicate than if we were on the phone and video. And for incoming students, that's what they've been used to this summer in communicating with us. So for them, it's a continuity. And for students who are returning, you know, their summer advising was also phone and video when they were first years. So we're going to keep that going through the fall, with some in-person availability in the office just to answer quick questions. I also help oversee SOB tutoring, and tutoring for SOB and the other tutoring services on campus I know are all preparing so that remote students will have access as well.
That's great, thank you. Kaylee, do you have anything to add? You went over it quite a bit in your presentation, but is there anything in terms of your office that you'd want to add in terms of in-person and on camp or remote access?
But when I was speaking earlier, and similar to Katie's setup, actually Katie and I's offices are right across from one another, so we'll be having the same format in terms of how we're open for an office. But I work in what's called the Division of Student Life, so it's a variety of offices that support students in their experiences on campus, sort of outside of the classroom. And many of the offices throughout the division are going to be holding similar office hours. So the physical offices will be open. There's going to be staff here working. I'm actually in my office right now, down the hall from Bruce. And you know, we'll be here, and at the same time, we'll be offering more remote office hours and appointments for students as well. So it kind of depends on the different office to some degree, but we will be here on campus supporting our students.
Great, thank you. Anne, could you talk a little bit about students and office hours and
Sure. Yeah. in the fall class that I teach, the general chemistry class, I feel like I do a lot of office hour promotion, because I think a part of transitioning to college is like figuring out what is this thing called office hours, like what's it for. I tell my students that they can bring a friend to office hours. They can come even if they can't pinpoint what they're confused about. So let me back up. Normally in a typical fall, I'll have like 4 different hours throughout the week where students can drop in at my office, and it's open for questions. That's what office hours are. And they can make appointments for other times. I usually use Google Calendar to schedule appointments for other times outside of those times. But students at the beginning often are just confused about what office hours are for. And I think there's a certain intimidation factor, unfortunately. I like to make my office friendly. I have Legos when you first come into the office, and they're all the little scientists. That's great. I could go on and on. I have lots of fun and interesting, distracting things in the office to try to make it friendly. But I do still think that that's intimidating. So in this COVID fall, I actually think there's some advantages. I haven't fully sat down and thought exactly when the office hours are going to be and which ones are which access. I could envision certainly having some on-campus office hours, because I'll be on campus for the classes I'm teaching. But those might be in a different location, might be a bigger room or outside, or at our symbolic and quantitative reasoning tutor center. So sometimes people will hold office hours. Faculty already move around campus for office hours in normal times to try to take down that barrier of people being scared of their offices. So there, I don't have a firm, solid answer. There will definitely be Zoom office hours, and there probably will be some, in addition, in person at some level on campus. And I that's just me. The problem with college is there's not a lot of necessarily like full uniformity, and I just, Rob could do something different, and other people could do something a little bit different. So that's just one example.
Well, let me ask Rob what he is doing for the fall.
Let me add a little bit to that. So it's interesting. I have office hours, but the reality is I'm in my office. It's going to be one of the big changes. I'm in my office all day long, and students drop by. They just drop by. So there's 3 kinds of office hours: the scheduled office hours, the ones where my students literally, they just drop by, and I sort of feel like if I'm there and my door is open and they drop by, we'll have the conversation unless I'm really pressed for time. The other kind is where they make appointments, and that actually tends to be the dominant kind. What happened in the spring, and I am going to tell students this as we begin the semester, I missed, after we had to leave the college, I missed those drop-bys. So I told students, when you think of something that you need to talk to me about, send me an email. And if I happen to be at the computer and I think I've got the time to do that, we will talk. And more than a few times in the spring, we set up, many of them have iPhones. I have a Mac, so we would have FaceTime conversations. And I'm going to try and do the same thing this fall, even with the expanded instructional hours, because it works really well. Anecdotally, just very quickly, a student who went home to New Hampshire, took him a long time to get there. I was worried about him. He got home. He sent me an email at 5:15 our time. It was the perfect time of day for me to have this conversation. He had a question about material. He was working on his paper. I sent him an email back and said, let's FaceTime. It was just this wonderful experience to see him sitting in front of me, to know he was well, to have that conversation. So I do think, I think the way this is going to work is in that sort of organic way, and that's how I think it works for a lot of us, and will sort of replicate itself in the COVID online world in its own way. So I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you. For myself, I have advisees every year as well, and I did a number of walk and talk advising sessions where I had to get all the way across campus, and I told students, hey, if you don't mind walking all the way over to East Hall, that's a good 10-minute walk. We can have I can answer your questions. So let's move on to another question. A couple people asked, once a student sees what types of courses they have, can they make changes to their schedules? This is a perfect question for Katie McFadden, our resident expert on all
I
things
felt like I'd be up, yeah. Sure, okay, so so course types are being put in, I'll put in this weekend. I actually think both Rob and Anne, I really liked how you explained that what it would be like for students who are remote, and whether they're remote or in person. I liked all the commonalities. I think that helped me understand that, even despite what the mode says, there might be a lot of commonalities for students. But let's say you look at the course type and you'd like to make changes to your schedule. Both incoming and returning students can do that in WebAdvisor through 11:59 p.m. on August 14th. So all next week. If a student has questions or needs help, they should feel free to contact us in the Advising Center. Maybe we can figure out a way to share that link on here for our office and Kaylee's office. But yeah, we can talk about that. If a course has open seats, you can make a swap on your schedule.
Just this morning, I had a advising session with a student who is living in Switzerland, and we talked through it, switching one class for another. So I know you can do it right now.
You can do it. And we have a video library on our site, and we made a short video called Swap Don't Drop that shows you how to do a swap. So if anything's wrong with adding the class, it won't drop you from the thing you're trying to drop. You'll retain it. It's a very conservative way to try to make the change in WebAdvisor. You'd have to listen to more of my voice explaining it, but I show you what you do in WebAdvisor. So that's another option there.
Great, thank you. I did reach out to faculty last week. One of the reasons that your students are hearing from faculty quite a bit this summer is that I've asked them to reach out to students, whether it be from hybrid classes, whether it be in-person required or in remote classes, to have faculty like Rob reach out to students and say, this is what the class is going to be like, and give them more information about it. In many ways, the modality is the mode that the class will be taught in is, I think, less salient, is less important. I think what's important is the students' engagement with that material. And I'll emphasize what Katie said about many paths to a successful first-year experience at Lewis and Clark. All successful Lewis and Clark first-year experiences do require students to take advantage of that breadth, to really find what interests them and to reach out to faculty and staff here. Okay, before I get too carried away, let's move on to another question. Here's a pretty nuts and bolts one. Do students need to leave campus by November 20th, or can they leave on November 21st? What is the guidance? So I can answer that and then maybe ask Kaylee or Katie to jump in. But no, the November 20th, which is the Friday, that is the last day of on-campus instruction. And the reason we wanted to, usually we have class the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of Thanksgiving week. And students leave either sometimes Tuesday, but sometimes Wednesday night. And for health reasons, we didn't want students traveling on some of the busiest days of the year. And we think they'll be busy this year and COVID year as well. If students can leave Friday night on the 20th, if they could leave on the 21st, they could leave on the 22nd, they can stay here on campus. International students, we expect, will stay on campus during Thanksgiving. And we will accommodate them. But we believe the majority of our students will leave before Thanksgiving and go home and complete the last 10 instructional days remotely at home. The one stipulation is if you leave campus and travel for Thanksgiving, then you will stay and do the rest of your classes remote and not return during the fall semester. But that is flexible, the travel arrangements, not just on the 20th, but whenever you can make those travel arrangements. It just has to be, if they have class on the 20th, I would recommend doing it after they have finished their last class on the 20th. Anything, Katie, is there anything I missed on that? You're my resident expert on the rules. No? Okay, thank you. Let's see, why don't we go to, there's a question here about requirements for cameras and mics on Zoom sessions. So there's a couple ways. Maybe I can have the faculty members talk about their remote students and kind of the expectations they would have. But I also, if you don't mind, Kaylee, could I have you talk a little bit about some of the remote students who might have different needs, different challenges in terms of the remote sessions. But maybe I'll start with Rob. Could you talk a little bit about expectations for, probably technical expectations for the fall?
Yeah, you know, where this will apply for me will be in the tutorials, because those will be the live sessions. My expectation normally would be, and that worked very well in the spring with my Greek students, that they would all have their cameras on and their mics on. Oftentimes, when students weren't speaking, if they had dogs or cats or family in the background, they would mute, perfectly acceptable. But the sort of the norm in the tutorials will be that everybody will have everything on, so that we can all hear each other and see each other at the same time. With, of course, the restrictions, I think Kaylee will probably talk about some of those things where we've got to be respectful of some student needs. And of course, we'll work with those. But for me, in the tutorials, that would be the norm for students to have their cameras and their mics on so that they can be a part of that conversation.
Great. Kaylee, could you speak a little bit about the technical aspects for remote?
Sure, yeah. So we have been working with some students over the summer as they prepare to engage in remote learning. And this really, Rob spoke to the live sessions in particular. So some students, for a number of reasons, mostly around mental health concerns, may have accommodations that allow them to turn their video off during a live session or mute themselves. And these are approved accommodations for documented disabilities. So a student would have to work through my office, Student Support Services, to have approval to do this if it were not something that were to be allowed for class participation by a faculty member. It's something that we've approved and are working on with some students. There's a small handful of students that are pursuing these accommodations, but it is a possible accommodation if that's what a student does indeed need in order to fully be able to engage in online classes. There are also some tips and tricks for, like, Katie has her background changed. So some students, they don't want others to see their environment around them, or their environment is distracting. Maybe there's younger siblings or children in the background. So a Zoom background screen like Katie has up is really helpful for those students to block out the background images. We have some, Lewis and Clark has some great ones available on our website too. So if you're looking for a fun background, you can check that out on our website.
Great, thank you. Again, that's where I need some upgrading in terms of my background as well. Kaylee, while I have you on there, there was a question about work, study, jobs, and any changes to this. So could you talk about this in terms of perspectives with the Student Support Services?
Sure, yeah. So I'm not quite sure what other departments across campus are doing, but I can speak for my office in particular, what we're doing and how we're handling student employment in our office. So for Student Support Services, we hire 70 to 80 students every semester to serve as note takers for students who have a note-taking accommodation. So if you're looking for a student job, we'll be posting that at the beginning of school. Usually we post that job on the HR website the first week of school. We also have student staff in our office that work at our front desk. And right now we are planning to continue to hire those students. We will have a slight reduction in our open office hours, kind of 1 hour on the front end and 1 hour on the back end of the day. But we're still hiring students to work in our office because, like I said before, our physical office will be open and we'll still need the assistance from those student workers. Various offices across campus are also hiring. There's jobs posted for students right now on our human resources website. So if you're looking for a job, make sure you check it out and apply early and often to those positions. A lot of the student jobs do get posted the first week, second week of classes, once we have our students here and engaged in the academic year. So be on the lookout for student jobs. We'll still be hiring.
Great, thank you. Anne, did you want to speak a little bit about jobs and opportunities?
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, in our department in chemistry, we always have a lot of student employees, and I think we're still planning to have a lot. And so as an example, an on-campus job would be helping to prep laboratories. There's always a staff that does that, students. And then a lot of jobs in tutoring and peer group leading, teaching assistant in the laboratory setting. And all of those on-campus jobs in March transitioned to online, and we had work for people to do and they got paid. So, you know, for example, if we're doing a 12-person in-person problem solving, we may not need the peer tutor that we would normally have when we had 30. But online, we might use a peer tutor to help go to different breakout groups and things like that. So a lot of the jobs that I've just been mentioning are often sophomore on up because somebody has already taken classes at Lewis and Clark before, or that kind of thing. But yeah, I think there's student jobs.
Thank you. No, I in some ways, I think there's as many student jobs, if not more. I know that we are also, and again, this is mostly upper class students, I believe, but we are engaging a lot of students as kind of classroom assistants to help with some of the technology and to help some of the work we're going to be doing to make sure that classes are accessible for those students who are off campus.
I'm going to interrupt, sorry, and say that I totally want a video editing assistant. Like, we're working on it, but boy, do I want a video editing assistant, because I want my I have visions of videos I want to make, and I could use some help.
Apply now to Ann Bentley's videographer. So there is a question somewhat along those lines about possible internships or experiences that might have been off campus. Just realistically, those are going to be much more limited than in previous years. And for freshmen, I think, for first-year students, there were many fewer kind of off-campus internships or those kind of opportunities. But for upper-class students, I believe for a lot of the departments like psychology, like education, where there are internships as part of the education. We also have a class called Inside Out, part of the Inside Out program that has half of the students who are incarcerated students and half who are Lewis and Clark students, which is just an incredible, incredible, transformative class for students. And if you look, we have a story about it in the kind of glossy LC magazine. You can see it online. But those kind of experiences are incredible, and they're also not available right now. I mean, we just don't feel safe having students in that kind of environment. So that will be a bit less in terms of those opportunities. Will affect first year, I think, less than it will upper class students. Here is a question.
Could I add something there, Bruce?
Please.
This isn't my thing, but I can hear our director of the Career Center in my head.
Oh my God, yes.
If I think he'd want us to add though that I have a way to say it. The business of networking and exploring options after Lewis and Clark is 100% going on right now, and you could make appointments with the Career Center and talk about that, connecting with alum, having virtual coffee dates with people and picking their brain about what careers they got into. All of that is going strong, and we'd love students to keep engaging in it, even if the off-campus internship they had envisioned might not work. Many other things could, so.
I feel like I would be in the doghouse of both Rochester as well as all the folks at the Entrepreneurship Center who are, working triple time and being, forgive me, innovative in terms of using this, the opportunity of COVID to find creative and interesting ways to network their students with, everyone from Nike to Adidas to Keen to all kinds of different organizations around the city.
I talked to incoming first years this summer who already have an idea of what they'd like to explore, career-wise or after Lewis and Clark. And I think they were surprised to have me connect them with the Career Center so early. I'm like, no, it's not too early. You should really start to talk about that and think about it. So.
Now the 3 doghouses, the Career Center, the Entrepreneurship Center, and the new Center for Community and Global Health, which I think is going to really be an incredible resource for students, both from their first year on. So thank you for saving me from what would have been a follow-up email from our Career Center. So here's a question, a little more kind of nuts and bolts as well. How does adding a course after the 31st work? How do wait lists work? I know that students we've encouraged students, if anything interests them, to go on wait lists. So, I think that students are on many different wait lists. What does that look like going forward? So wait lists for now, I think, are a mechanism for all of the changes that students are making with their classes right now. And maybe Anne can help me because she is someone who, is a faculty member in popular classes, both intro classes, but also smaller advanced courses, can tell you from the kind of point of view of what it'll look like for a student. Yeah, could you, Anne, talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, actually this week is probably the first week so far that has become a bit of a big wait list week. So if there's a course that a student would like to register for, but it's full, there is a mechanism in WebAdvisor, which I call for new students the orange software. That's the screen that just goes fully orange all the time. You know it first years because you've registered, but there is a mechanism in there to add yourself to a wait list for a course. And those wait lists we then as faculty have access to see. But so up until August 14th, that end of that Friday, you can do all your own adding and dropping. However, if a class is full, so let's say there's a section of lab for Chem 110 that has 24 enrolled right now and like 5 on the wait list. If one of those 24 who's enrolled right now moves themselves to a different section and opens up a spot, the registrar office, it generates an automatic invitation to the first person on the wait list to take the class, and you have 48 hours to get yourself into that spot that opened up for you. So check your Lewis and Clark email daily is one big advice until August 14th. And then after that point, then we move into the add drop kind of phase. And at that point, changes are made starting later in August. I think it opens up for first year students the weekend before classes start, and for returning students the week of classes. Returning students are more familiar with this add drop. The key in the add drop period is to be in contact with the professor teaching the course that you want to add. And that's essential. You could start that now because I'm already keeping my own personal wait list, which is, some people are like, well, I couldn't get myself on that WebAdvisor wait list. And in our case, that's okay. Just send me the email. And in our chemistry case with 6 lab sections, you'll see my name on all 6 of them. I'm not teaching all 6 of them, but I'm I'm just on them all 6. There's always someone who's coordinating all the adding and dropping in our department. So fire off emails in all directions and they will land in the right place. So lots of advice. Until the 14th, get yourself on WebAdvisor waitlist, but it doesn't hurt to send a polite and persistent emails to faculty until you get what you need. And one more thing is, you know, I think a lot of people are stressed. Well, what if I can't get the courses I need and then I can't graduate and it takes me 5 years? And like, in my experience as an advisor and as a professor in courses at Lewis and Clark, I haven't seen that be a problem. Like Chem 110, people get into it. It may not have happened by August 6th. And I hope that it's not causing you to lose sleep every night until the end of August. Like, talk to us and we will keep you on our radar and we will make sure you're getting into the classes. At least that's true from my chemistry experience, because we know that's one at our school, you can't sit out a year and wait on it. You know, you wanna take it.
Thank you, Anne. That advice, I think, is, I saw myself and I saw Katie McFadden both nodding our heads vigorously when Anne was talking about first emailing the faculty member. We are, as faculty members, emailing students a lot right now to keep them informed of classes. Please, I tell my advisors all the time, email your faculty members, email the faculty of the class you want to get into with a polite and persistent email, and it will do wonders. This is the kind of place where those kind of relationships and that kind of advocacy make a difference, because it is a small enough place where that kind of person-to-person relationship is, you know, it's not a big bureaucracy. It's much more a place where you want to email your professors and go to office hours. And also her advice about not losing sleep about getting on wait lists and getting off wait lists. That is absolutely my experience as well. Here is a question, and so with so many students being online for classes at the same time, has Wi-Fi broadband been expanded in a way to ensure good access across campus and dorms? And so yes, we have been doing a lot of upgrades technically on campus. The one place where I think Wi-Fi will be a little more difficult is in the outdoor areas. We have done some upgrades to provide better Wi-Fi access in some of the tents, some of the outdoor spaces that we'll be using for classrooms. But I don't want every student in that class to be trying to download a Netflix movie, because that probably is not going to be able to happen. But the basic needs of a class in those spaces, yes, is my understanding. And yes, in terms of dorm and library and other spaces, we're constantly working on our capacity for Wi-Fi, because it's become, even before COVID, a utility, a need to do the kind of work we do. So we've been working on those upgrades, not only in the classrooms, but around campus. Let's see. Would students be able to come home for a weekend before Thanksgiving? We've gotten a few questions that are probably better for student life than for the academic dean. But Kaylee, as a student life person, do you feel, I mean, we are actually saying that for health and safety reasons, we don't want students going back and forth to their home. One of the reasons we did cancel the usual October break, where some students do travel home, we canceled that and made those instructional days in order to grab some instructional days at the end of the year. And that was for health reasons, and to keep the number of kind of interactions and kind of breaking up the epidemiological bubble on campus as little as possible. Kaylee, could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we are asking students to forgo non-essential travel, is what we're calling it. So that would include a trip home or up to Seattle or down to California. You know, just as you would be self-isolating in your home, like I have been since March. I'm really limiting my travel to go to the grocery store, go to the doctor, go to those essential services that I need, you know, pick up prescriptions, things like that. So we are asking students and staff and faculty to limit their travel as well. So that will be an expectation of our students for this fall.
Great, thank you. Let's see, how about, we have time for probably one or two more questions. Where will, I assume this means for on-campus students, where will students take virtual classes if their roommates need to take classes simultaneously? So I've been part of, I put together a couple of faculty working groups this summer, one around teaching and pedagogy, and they created dozens of workshops that everything from technology to learning management platforms to, but the other was around logistics. And we've talked about this question of students who, for example, Anne's chemistry class on Monday, where the whole class meets as a group, but does so online, where do they do so? I think that we are providing spaces on campus for students to do that, but I think many students will do that from their dorm room. And I think that many students will do it with headsets, with two students in the dorm room. I know my partner and I know many partners who have learned to work together in the same room and have learned that is an excellent adult skill that everyone needs to learn how to do. And I think our students will learn to do that with someone that they are meeting as their roommate and learning to live with. I know that Student Life is working on a lot of programming for incoming students around this question of cohorting, of finding a group of students that they will socialize with and work with that form a kind of pod. I think that's going to be important for both studying and for socializing. Students will study in the library. Students have always studied in the library. Students will study on the steps outside of Howard. I think that the being creative and learning where your students, first-year students, are going to study will be an important part of their transition to Lewis and Clark. And the answer might be different for different students, but we can help them learn some of the best places on campus to study. Anybody want to add anything to that? Anything I missed in terms of where students are studying?
Yeah, this is Rob. You know, I suspect in part because some spaces will have emptied out. There are nooks and crannies, for instance, in Howard Hall where students have always sort of set up shop. Those spaces, I suspect, are going to become all the more important. And there's good internet access in those places. So I think students will find their way. It'll be interesting to see what it looks like once it all settles down. But they're pretty resourceful about finding spaces for themselves.
We have some nice little study tables that are definitely 6 feet apart, plenty of room for social distancing. And we'll have just one chair at one table, so you'll have your own little study desk. So you're welcome to come over and do your schoolwork in our space. We'd love to have you.
And I was just in the library yesterday saying hi to folks, but also looking for some books. And they have set up their spaces, the study carrels, some of the desks, some of the others, again, with social distancing in mind, with some plexi, with other things to keep people safe, but also to give them a space to study. And we've always kind of prided ourselves on the library being a place where students can go. I mean, it has a lot of hours and a lot of availability and a lot of nooks and crannies, as Rob said. So students should take advantage of that. So one last question, and it's the question about kind of social interaction opportunities, both inside of class and outside of class. So I know many of the faculty members I've talked to have talked about creating small pods in their classes. And I think Anne and Rob, you both have talked about creating cohorts. And for those cohorts who are on campus, giving opportunities for them to get together in person and do work. But also kind of social opportunities via student life, through clubs, through sports. Obviously, the competitive sports will be different. I know the Northwest Conference has made some announcements, and that's on our website as well. Kaylee will know more about that than I will. But do people want to talk a little bit about that aspect of the curricular and the co-curricular in the coming year?
You know, I'll speak very quickly. The tutorial groups, one of the things I'll tell these groups is I'm going to keep them in the same groups for half the semester and rearrange. That's the plan right now. I've actually been talking to a number of former students to ask them their druthers about this, and this seems to be the model right now. But one of the things I'm planning on doing is telling students that they should use these as groups in which they can develop some relationships, some friendships that they might not otherwise have developed in an ordinary course setting. So we'll see how that goes. But I think those are, that they're not all gonna turn into best friends. But I suspect there will be some who, will establish those sort of long-standing relationships. So again, my aim is to use those as a way of getting them to develop some social circles.
Yeah, and I'll speak to the student life side. So for new students, certainly your very first experience for engaging with the Division of Student Life and engaging with a small group of other students, other like-minded students with similar interests, will be our virtual new student trips hosted by the College Outdoors office. Those trips, quote unquote, virtual trips will be taking place August 17th through August 20th. It will be a series of online engagements using Zoom with small groups, lots of different activities to get to know your peers, get to know some of the upperclassmen student leaders, and forge those relationships. Typically, we have these really great, cool outdoor trips along the Pacific Northwest, and we've kind of shifted gears and started to offer these virtual new student trips. So it's just one way that we're being really creative as a college to make sure our students are still engaging and having that really robust student experience, but also a way for you to engage and still get to know your peers and form really strong relationships. We're also offering a lot of really cool and interesting virtual engagements. We will still have some small in-person meetings of clubs and organizations, but we're offering new creative virtual engagements as well. My office, Student Support Services, is going to be offering, I think in a week or so, a social hour where we get to know our emotional support animals and pets. And so over Zoom, it will be my staff with our animals. So my dog Finley will be with me, and Carolyn, my administrative specialist, will have her bunnies. And students are invited to bring their emotional support animals or pets and get to know us and get to know other students along with our animals that we love and care about. So we're doing really cool stuff like that we wouldn't normally do pre-COVID times, pre-virtual engagement. So I'm excited about events like that.
I'll just put in a really short plug for students on campus. And I think I was reading something today. I can't say I'm an expert on what's okay and not, but I remember reading that students are not kind of expected to leave. Like Kaylee was saying, the kind of quarantines that we've been under in terms of venturing off campus. But I think you could claim you were going for a walk for exercise if you showed up in Tryon Creek State Park, which is a beautiful outdoor area across the street from the college. So if I were living on campus for the semester, I would be running in Tryon, I would be walking in Tryon, I would be, I guess, I don't know, cartwheeling in Tryon. You know, I would be in Tryon frequently, and I would commit myself to getting to know the place. It's quite, students, I shouldn't say this, but sometimes we send them to collect water from Tryon for chemistry experiments or biology work, and occasionally they get a little bit lost. I mean, we're not fully lost, but it's a maze and it's a beautiful place to explore. So that's probably too much time for one state park, but I love it.
No, and the scene behind Katie, is that Tryon Creek Park, or is that just the area around campus?
No, this is, I mean, this is just walking from one building to another.
Oh my God.
Like, that's why I love this, because it's just, you know, it's my 10 a.m. walk from one meeting to the next. I'm like, yeah, it's a great campus.
So we are at 6 o'clock, and I encourage all of you, there are a few questions we didn't get to. There's a lot of resources online, the Fall 20 reopening page, some FAQs for NSO, other support. We will keep communicating with families, with students. Please reach out to us. If you have questions, there's lots of ways you can do that, either to NSO, to Student Life, to lots of other places, and to individual faculty members. So thank you for your time today. Thank you to all my colleagues and fellow panelists. And please have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.